It's okay, now
Okay.
go.
Alright, so Issa,
Yes.
Mars,
I'm Mars, obviously. You know us.
and my gender workbook. Just say yes.
Unless it destroys the screen again.
But we wanted to talk today about the nothingness that Kate Bornstein tried to go over, and we were talking a little bit, trying to grapple, like, what does that actually mean?
What does it look like?
Like, what is tangible nothingness?
Which is kind of an ironic
It's
statement in
ironic,
itself.
but I mean, like, even like conceptually, things can be
And it goes back to
conceptually
the concept of
tangible.
paradox, I think, in this as well. So.
Yeah, but there's an email from David Harrison that I think explains it kind of well. I liken it to being an actor preparing for a role. You have to shed a layer of physical mannerisms, like taking off a coat, and get to zero. Only then do you have the freedom and awareness to really shape who and what you want to be and build a character, or rather, yourself. And so for me, nothingness is rolling back all the biases and all the gender stereotypes that have shaped your identity, and removing that and coming to a point where you are actually you.
Mm-hmm.
And that is how we have arrived to this understanding of nothingness. And personally, me being transsexual, it's a little bit easier to find that point, that 0 point for me, because it's only where Zach ended and Issa began. But even then...
Do you have, like, that moment, just out of curiosity, do you have, like, that one moment where you could say, I was no longer Zach and I was Issa from that point forward?
That's the thing, is it's weird. I mean,
there's more of a
there's been multiple moments where I felt like I've had zeros.
Multiple zero moments?
Yeah, multiple zero moments. Like the first time I came out to myself,
Mm-hmm.
I was still grappling with being a guy, but
Mm-hmm.
also a girl. And
yeah.
I was just like, what's going on? And then I just sat on it for a little bit, and I just allowed female characteristics that I've like punished myself to not
like
do
to
anymore.
Really strictly not to do, yeah.
Yeah, and I allowed those to come out, and then I changed my name.
Mm-hmm.
I chose Isadora, and I think after that that was actually my zero moment. Like my most vivid zero
mm-hmm.
moment is when I just said there's no more Zach. Like
mm-hmm.
I just actually laid down the law and said there's no more Zach. And any kind of media, culture, anything that I take in, I'm going to express and analyze in the truest way I actually want to.
And what was that like for you as you like kind of pulled back more of the Zach stuff and started, like you said, letting your more female behaviors?
Well, I definitely...
Was it freeing, or were you nervous? Or?
It was literally freeing, because I'm a far more animated person
mm-hmm.
now. I do a lot more, like, I have more energy in my speech and
mm-hmm.
stuff. Like, beforehand, I think it would be a little bit deadpanned, and I'd be not actually shy, but have shy mannerisms.
Makes sense. Oh, somebody's coming in.
And the biggest moment that I really had was with...
It's okay.
the biggest moment the latest biggest moment I've had is actually with hormones, because like I have like things are sinking, like they're actually sinking,
mm-hmm.
because in the transsexual brain it's more female than male, and so when female biological occurrences start happening, you can actually feel it.
mm-hmm.
I would say, because like it feels like there's less of a battle going on in my mind.
Yeah, it's less like you're fighting things, so you're fighting yourself, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm trying to...
Yeah. And that would be my moment. So like, but I definitely did have to like strip back who I was, and
what's like,
then
was allowing the female stuff part of stripping it back, or did you have to strip back to 0 and then allow the female? Out of curiosity, or was that switch over, that was the
yeah, it was a little weird because I mean, well, I'd say I was working mainly 90% stripping the unnecessary maleness away from me, while 10% building my female identity, or maybe just getting a foundation ready. And then once I had reached a point where I was satisfied with any like lack of like constrictions, male constrictions, I just
you had more room
I completely moved forward with female development of my identity and self.
Cool.
Yeah. And what about yours, Zero?
I have trouble finding my 0. I don't know that I have even found it yet. I think I've had like you're saying about having multiple 0s. I feel like I've had a couple different 0s. I know like back in high school, when I was first introduced to the concept of what my mom then called like gender neutral, because she was working with a professor for her PhD, and the professor was doing research on, she was a statistics professor, and she was looking at if you could statistically isolate genders, like certain characteristics in genders, and just, it was, I don't completely understand it, but one of the categories that I remember her talking about was gender neutral. I was like, oh, that's really cool, that's neat that there's someone in between. And I said that I kind of felt like that was me, and she kind of explained it away, like, no, you're not gender neutral, whatever. But I did more research on it, and I was like, oh, that's kind of more where gender neutrals. And then I think as I got older, I realized more and more that it wasn't so much gender neutral, because I definitely felt gendered. It wasn't like a lack of gender. It was more just a different gender. And it was weird to wrap my head around the fact that you could be, that there were other genders outside of your male and your female. And I thought you just kind of had variations on your genders. I thought you had like, you know, you had like the more masculine women, or the more feminine women, or the more feminine men, and the more masculine men. But, you know, when you start looking at it, there are genders that are just completely outside of that binary, and it's something that we don't wrap our heads around. It's not polar at all, you know.
That's really interesting, because I definitely, one part that I feel about like my gender experience is that I'm less attached to being a female, but I'm more dedicated to having a female body, because like I know that's like
that's what you'd be more,
because like didn't she go over in this a little fuzzy on the reading, didn't she go over to just like you just go after like what you feel in this chapter?
A little bit, yeah.
Because that was a little bit with me, because like I'm a little bit apathetic about being female, but it's of the utmost importance that like I'm female.
Yeah, that you present as female. Yeah. And I mean, because like when they talk about the email from David Harrison, they talk about you know, if you're so attached to fluidity, why was it so important to you to make such a drastic physical change? You know, like if you think gender is fluid, then why change your body so drastically? And he talks about, you know, you look back and you forget how absolutely necessary that change was. And I think this is where it made sense to me, the whole like idea of getting back to 0 and the nothingness thing, is because when I first came to college, and I've talked about this in multiple of my papers, so, you know, I'm sure Hara's tired of hearing this, but when I first came to college, I grew my hair out. I had really short hair in high school, not quite this short, but, you know, like really short hair, and you know, I was I guess a little more butch, I don't know, but I wanted to be accepted really bad in college because of what I'd been through in high school. And so I grew my hair out, I started wearing really feminine clothes, I started wearing makeup differently and just everything else, and there came a point last year where I just was like, I looked in the mirror, I was like, this is not me. You know, I saw myself with the long hair and the feminine clothes, and it literally like made me sick to look at myself like that. To look at myself as like a feminine person, and it felt so wrong. I couldn't stand it. So I ended up going, and a couple weeks later I was like, alright, I'm going back to the short hair. That's the first step. I'll just, I'll try short hair, it'll still be feminine, you know, pixie cuts work, and I did kind of work there, but I was like, no, I need to go more. And so I've kind of gone more towards, I think, what I would call sort of, not the middle, but I've gone away from the female identity. And the farther away I get from the female identity, the more comfortable I am. It's not that I seek to be masculine by any means, but it's that femme identity that was like pushed on me as growing up in the South. I realize more and more that that's just so not me, and the more I strip that away, I think the more I find that I'm more comfortable with myself. I'm so much more confident when I'm not dressed femme, or my version of femme, what I consider femme. So.
And she talks in this chapter about postmodernism, and I think that's actually a good way to like come to understanding nothingness, because like postmodernism is really saying that there's no objective truth, and it's more focused on what isn't than what is, and I feel like that naturally wires you to that concept of
to examine
nothingness.
your truth, to examine how you arrived at your truth, and because like I think that a big part, for me at least, of how I understand postmodernism is less the truth, but how did you get there? You know, because for me, what my big thing I go back to when I think of postmodernism is a lot of like Kurt Vonnegut literature, and a lot of what he focuses on is why did people arrive at these conclusions that these things were truths, that these were okay, and I think that's been a huge part of what's driven a lot of postmodern literature, has been how did people get there, and I think that that's very relevant to the idea of finding your zero, and of just, you know,
finding nothingness.
Yeah, because it's a process, and she even talks about, you know, how you change in response to your environment and to the people you're with, but it's that process seems to be what's most important.
Because I definitely know that, like, at least even with my voice, I don't exactly have a zero. If I'm with my friends who I have been transitioning in front of, like from Zach to Isa, my voice will drop instantly. Like, it's just an instantaneous, like, I can't take that coat mannerism off that he talks about in the email. But when I'm around people who more just solidly know me as Isa and haven't really known as Zach, it's up here. You know.
It depends on who you're with. So, and I think that it's true in that whole process of negotiating those differences. I think it's relevant to postmodern. I think it's relevant to this as well, because
and also bringing in existentialism. Existentialism is good for nothingness, because, at least from my understanding of existentialism, it is saying that you are nothing and you build from nothing your life.
Exactly. You decide your own meaning, you decide your own purpose. It's all on you to discover that.
And I think that's thoroughly postmodern, and it's thoroughly what Kate is talking about.
I think it's completely like that. And it's funny because it makes me think, it reminds me of, I remember when I was first learning a lot of philosophy and stuff, and I was talking with my parents about it, especially with my dad, I remember him talking about how much he hated existentialism, like how horrible it made him feel. And so when I first started reading existential stuff, I was like nervous. I'm like, it's going to make me feel like crap. But for me, it was really empowering. But I think for people who are very invested in a certain identity, the idea that you make that identity, that you choose everything for yourself, that you build your purpose, it's just so completely mind-blowing and uncomfortable. Your discomfort level, I think, kind of shows how invested you are.
That's actually interesting that you say that, because there's a friend that I have who's deeply closeted, and like there's a lot of stuff on the line for him not to come out. Like, it's not just like, oh, why don't you come out? I'm afraid to tell my family. Like, it's a lot more serious than that. And he is disgusted with postmodernism, or he was before he came out to me personally. I don't know, like, maybe what his actual feelings are about it, but it's interesting that, like, it's dangerous it's dangerous for some people to say, I can just make what I am.
And I think it's like, as a movement, I think a lot of times the LGBTQ another Q, movement has been very big on pushing the whole, you know, I was born this way, I don't have a choice, this sort of stuff. But I think that sort of language, especially, I mean, in relation to gender, it's dangerous, because it promotes the idea that, you know, choices aren't to be, that you can only respect things that aren't choices, like that there's no respect to be given for choices.
And there's no way that you can arrive to a certain gay identity or a certain lesbian identity. And
I think it denies the level of fluidity that is inherent in a lot of sexualities.
And also gender identity.
And in gender identity, exactly. And if you're spouting that kind of stuff, I think it's just a step away from not respecting choices. And I never said, what does it matter that you were born that way, you know, or what does it matter that people say it's not a choice, but what if it was? Does that make it any less valuable or any less respectful that you have that identity? Like,
and at 15 minutes.
I should probably.
I think that we've covered all that we wanted to cover.
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah.
So I will stop recording now. Yay.